religious liberty is the necessary prerequisite to have a certain liberty of mind, liberty of thought, to be able to pursue and understand and embrace and accept truth, right? If you have a government that's saying, no, you must be this sect, right? You must pinch incense to Caesar, or whatever it is, that prevents the conscience and the individual person from freely being able to seek truth. Welcome to the Napa Legal Podcast. I'm Frank DeVito, Senior Counsel and Director of Content at Napa Legal.
And I'm Joseph Clement, Content and Program Manager at Napa Legal.
You're listening to the Napa Legal Weekly Podcast, where we explore some of the most interesting ongoing legal and policy updates regarding religious liberty and the work of faith-based nonprofits. So this week, we wish our listeners a Merry Christmas, and we figured we would do something a little bit different because obviously the news cycle slows down a little bit, but also we just figured it would be nice to take a break from the weekly cycle and step back a little bit and talk about some of the foundational purposes and origins of Napa Legal, why we do what we do, why we think it's important, in particular to support the work of faith-based nonprofit organizations and the lawyers that work with them. So we are going to start there. I just want to talk a little bit because I realized we're here, we do our updates. We talk to you every week about these particular cases, but we don't actually have much out there on our YouTube channel, on our podcast channels across the board that goes into who we are and why we are. So let's start a little bit with the origins. So for people who don't know, I think a lot of our listeners probably do, but not all, especially because we've picked up a lot of listeners from our fellowship program and from other places who may not know how we came to be and how we occupy the kind of unique space that we do in the religious liberty movement. So Napa Legal was founded in 2018. So we're just over 7 years old now. Got going and actually got staff and started working in 2019. And the purpose was very particular. So our co-founders, Tim Bush and John Pfeiffer, saw a lack in the religious liberty legal space, right? If you had legal problems as an organization, as an individual, and you end up in court, right? You're sued, you're being investigated by an agency, something like that. There were people who could help you. Right? You'd have Alliance Defending Freedom, you have the Beckett Fund, you have First Liberty, Thomas More Society. There are a lot of these firms doing really good work to protect religious individuals and organizations and their rights in court. But what we noticed is that, for one, there's a lot of legal stuff that we fondly call the boring stuff, right? Legal compliance with state registrations, corporate governance, making sure that your bylaws and your articles are done correctly, that you're complying with all the laws on the front end so that you never end up in court in the first place. So that's important. Obviously, there are times where no matter how well you protect your organization with, good compliance, good corporate governance practices, good policies and contracts and all that, you still may just run afoul of a law or a regime that's hostile to religion, to religious liberty, to the work that the organization is doing, and have to be in court, right? No matter how well you do these front-end protections, there is obviously a need for religious liberty litigation. But we thought there's so much lack in education on compliance from nonprofits, especially smaller nonprofits, right? Big organizations that are bringing in $10 and $20 and $50 million a year. They have their own lawyers. They pay for lawyers. They tend to be more legally savvy. But there are so many ministries doing crucial work, right? Schools, classical schools, pro-life pregnancy centers, small religious radio stations, charities that feed the poor, and so on, that are not bringing in tons of money. They certainly don't have lawyers on staff. They may have never talked to a lawyer in the first place. And so the reason that we exist is to help educate these nonprofit leaders to improve their legal compliance. So we offer resources, lectures, seminars, in-person conferences, as many different kinds of resources that we can that we think will reach these nonprofits so that they can understand what their legal compliance obligations are and hopefully start to fulfill them, whether that means connecting them to lawyers or just having them to understand some of these basic concepts and be more compliant on their own. It was a really important niche, and it works really well with the religious liberty litigation groups. We've had support from people at really all of these organizations. We've been friendly with and worked with people from Beckett, Alliance Defending Freedom, First Liberty, Thomas More Society, and many others. Um, because what we do is complementary, right? Because first of all, we can help protect organizations so they don't have to end up in court and need, pro bono representation in court. But also on the flip side, when those litigation organizations litigate religious liberty issues, and then we get new precedents from the court that guide us on, well, how should nonprofits be behaving? How should faith-based organizations be behaving based on this precedent? We can take those precedents and then craft them into best practices going forward so that organizations know what to do and how to work with the new court precedents as they come down. So that's why we were formed. That's continues to be the heart of the mission, is to help nonprofit organizations, religious organizations, to be in compliance with the law and protect themselves as best as they can so that they can pursue and accomplish their missions without being bogged down by administrative red tape, investigations, court cases, and so on. So with that in mind, we do kind of fit into the bigger religious liberty movement, so to speak. But our view of that, I think, is colored by, first of all, the fact that we're an explicitly Catholic organization. So what we think religious liberty is and what it's for is a little bit colored by our Catholic identity. And then also we are looking at religious liberty, as we say every week on this podcast, from the perspective of faith-based nonprofits. So the kinds of religious liberty issues that are focused on individual free exercise practice, individual religious rights, we do cover a lot of it in our weekly updates. But the heart of what we do is monitoring and analyzing and educating on the laws that affect religious organizations, nonprofits in particular. So Joseph, I think I was going to turn it over to you at this point. Maybe if you talk a little bit more about how religious liberty work, how it fits into the whole religious liberty scene and the importance of that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, Frank, Napa Legal serves people of all faith backgrounds, kind of regardless of what that looks like. But as a Catholic organization ourselves, we have a Catholic understanding of what religious liberty is. And we do have a little bit of content out there on our YouTube about this. But I'd like to just take a few minutes explaining kind of the fundamentals of why we believe this is so important. And I'd encourage anyone who's looking for a little bit more on this kind of thing to read Dignitatis Humanae. It's a great letter from Saint Pope Saint Pope Paul VI, published about 60 years ago to the date. And in there's a lot of great sentences, but there's this one really great sentence that I think summarizes a lot of what we believe about religious liberty and why it's so important. And there, the late Pope Saint writes, "God himself has made known to mankind the way in which men are to serve him. So basically, mankind is created with dignity. He's created in the imago Dei, right, free and with reason and free will. And because of that, he's able to think and know. And through the natural exercise of those capabilities, God has made it such that mankind is able to know God. So natural to man is this capability to discover God and to pursue a relationship with him. And that's really the heart of what it means to be free to exercise your religion, right? By our nature, we are able to know God. As St. Ignatius put, we're able to know, love, and serve God. And this is the animus of why we exist. This is why human beings were created in the first place. So by man's nature, we are free, and that freedom is to pursue a relationship with God. Thus, any society that claims to be valid and any government that says it actually respects what human beings are for has to respect this fundamental, natural, inherent right? This capability and freedom exists before a society. It's not because of a government. The government doesn't give this right. Rather, it has to protect it. And kind of hitting all the big names we went there. So we went with St. Ignatius already. We already mentioned Paul VI, another big name. Aristotle recognized that society is made pursuant to a good, right? And for any society to be valid, they have to pursue some sort of good. The high society exists to pursue the highest good. So in any society like a country or something, that kind of level of hierarchy, they have to enable people to pursue their highest good, which, as we've made clear, is the ability to know, love, and serve God. So any society that exists has to protect this fundamental right that exists before the government, that man is able to to come to know his God through the free exercise of his religion. I'm currently reading, it's great so far, I hope it stays that way, but I'm reading this great book called America on Trial, A Defense of the Founders by Robert Riley. And in it, he explains some of the philosophies, both chronologically and philosophically, that led to the American founding. He goes through Athens, Jerusalem, and Rome. Athens being Greek philosophers, not Athens itself, because as he observes, Socrates was killed for his beliefs. But Athens as a stand-in for some of Greek philosophers, Jerusalem as a stand-in for Judaism, and Christianity being Rome. And these kind of leading to the American founding, these philosophical recognitions that each of these societies began with. And in Athens, he says, this is where we first get the notion of kind of an objective reality, an objective morality, that mankind is free and that there is a divine law that exists above societal law and human positive law. So we get that from Greece. And then from Jerusalem, we get the idea of a loving, all-powerful God that wants to be in a relationship with a person. Right before Judaism, most of religion was we sacrifice to our God so the sun rises again tomorrow. Clearly not the understanding of Judaism, and they're kind of the first to recognize that there is a loving God who desires relationship. And then Rome, Christianity, kind of brought these two together, right? In Athens, we have this idea that there is a teleology of good for man. In Jerusalem, we get the idea of this transcendent monotheism, that God loves us and he wants to be with us and that he is above society. And Christianity brings these together by recognizing that A, man is free, and B, freedom is for a relationship with God. So what does this mean today for us in America? As we've kind of explained from the fundamental beliefs, mankind is naturally free to pursue a relationship with God. Therefore, any society, America included, has to respect this natural inherent right. And why does Napa Legal care about this from the perspective of faith-based nonprofits? Personally, this starts to get to one of my favorite things about my country. It's that our people join together to do stuff. It's pretty famous, especially for listeners of Napa Legal's podcast at this point, that Tocqueville observed upon coming to America that, and I'll read very briefly from one of his writings called America and Democracy, that of all the countries in the world, America has taken the greatest advantage of association and has applied the powerful means of action to the greatest variety of objectives. Basically what he's saying is that Americans bind together to do stuff, and we do important stuff. And I think that a lot of the work of individual Americans today is the work of faith-based nonprofits that we talk about so much. There, like you mentioned, Frank, there are great groups that specialize in kind of the individual liberties, and that's super important. We need people that do that. But in one sense, at least from my perspective, one of my favorite things about my country is that people bind together, and a lot of times it's to do important religious work, like these faith-based soup kitchens. We have stuff like Catholic Charities that help the poorest in our societies. We have groups that help with foster care. We have pregnancy resource centers, all these different things that are usually often religiously motivated that are so important for our country. There's plenty of other ways you could look at it. Like there's kind of this exponential model where if you help faith-based nonprofits, they go help more people, and then those people help more people, and it kind of grows. So lots of reasons that faith-based nonprofits are so important. And that's just the sphere of religious liberty that Napa Legal specializes in.
Great. Yeah, thank you. The one thing I would say too that I think colors both our understanding of religious liberty as Catholics and just as non-relativists, right? It's worth pointing out that, and you hinted at this, but religious liberty is not, and liberty generally, they're not goods in themselves, right? Being free from external constraints is not the point, nor is that in itself a good thing, right? So in the realm of religious liberty, the point is not we have a right to be free to believe and think whatever we want because it is good to have the right to believe and think whatever we want. That's wrong. Because as Catholics, of course, we believe that there is one truth, one true religion. And anybody who's not a relativist believes that there's one truth. We might disagree about exactly how we get to it or how far we can understand it, right? But for Catholics, to be saved, right, to know, love, and serve God in this life and then in eternity comes from assent to the Catholic faith, membership in the church, and salvation through Christ in the church, right? So that's where we want to get people. The point of religious liberty as such an important good, which this is what you were highlighting, I think, is that you can't get there by force, right? So religious liberty is the necessary prerequisite to have a certain liberty of mind, liberty of thought to be able to pursue and understand and embrace and accept truth, right? If you have a government that's saying, no, you must be this sect, right? You must pinch incense to Caesar or whatever it is, that prevents the conscience and the individual person from freely being able to seek truth. So always worth pointing that out, that liberty is for the sake of pursuing the truth, not for the sake of having liberty. Um, and I guess I'll spend a little more time here as we wrap up, just talking about some of these the programs. I'm going to expand on what you said for sure. The de Tocqueville observation is a great way to start the conversation of the importance of faith-based nonprofits. So we already talked about kind of how those programs look in our service of nonprofits. Most of our listeners are already familiar with what we do, right? We have our annual in-person conference, the Nonprofit Summit in California every summer. We have quarterly roundtable discussions where we bring in speakers and discuss the most relevant legal issues that we can find for our nonprofit users. And then we have this huge database of legal resources, educational resources that nonprofit leaders and those who serve them can go through to better understand the obligations and the unique legal requirements and protections that apply to faith-based nonprofits in particular. And then we're in the process now of updating and improving our boot camp resource. These are topic by topic modules, classes where we have organized our written resources, and increasingly I'm starting to record video lectures to accompany them so that we can really give courses on what faith-based nonprofit leaders need to know about these different areas of law. And to Joseph's point, this is not just a legal service, right? We're a nonprofit, so we see ourselves as an apostolate, in a way, an apostolate to apostolates, right? Because of exactly what you said. As Americans in particular, and just as Catholics who believe in subsidiarity, we believe that most things are done best on as local a level as possible, right? So just as we talk a lot about school choice and parental rights issues on this podcast, because an important tenet of our faith is that parents in general are the primary educators and caretakers and know what's best for their children rather than government agencies and school systems. And so that should be done on the local institutional level of the family, not the major institutional level of a school district or a state government. For the most part, there are obviously some things that can only be done on the higher level for organizational or uniformity purposes. But for the most part, we want things done locally, right? So most things are better done in a family. Most decisions are better being made at the local level of government. And then in the nonprofit world, rather than have gigantic and often inefficient and impersonal government agencies providing educational options, social welfare programs, and so on, most of these things are better done by faith-based nonprofit organizations, right? Like you can have a massive government program funded by tax dollars that feeds the poor, yes, but how much money bleeds off in bureaucracy? But beyond that, how well are the people being served, right? You might cut them a check, but is anybody acknowledging their dignity? Is there anybody loving them? When it's a government program, the answer is generally no. So it is just a better thing to have soup kitchens, to have on the ground church ministries that are feeding the poor and helping the homeless and so on. Same thing with pro-life pregnancy centers. These women don't just need a check. They need people who love them, who are going to support them, who are going to help them through the process of a difficult pregnancy, help them know that they're not alone, provide them resources in a personal way. So the list goes on, but this is the point of why we do what we do, is because for one, to build up civil society, most of these things are better done by faith-based nonprofit organizations that are generally run by and staffed by employees, volunteers, board members who actually love these missions, care about these missions, and are passionate about accomplishing them, rather than big institutional, impersonal endeavors that are maybe trying to fill a need materially, but are certainly not the best, most loving, or most efficient way to do them. And then, of course, we believe that faith-based nonprofits, the Christian ministries that we support in particular, are so important because, like we said about religious liberty, the highest good is the supernatural good, right? Which is people coming to faith, knowing, loving, and serving God. And so the nonprofits that we serve are often either indirectly by their charitable works or directly by evangelization efforts trying to spread the gospel. And so in our little way, by tending to the boring stuff and helping these nonprofits who are doing such important work across the board, religiously and charitably and civilizationally, if we can help them to tighten up their bylaws, keep better corporate records, make sure that they're actually filing their state registrations, keeping compliant with 501c3 obligations so they don't lose their tax exempt status. Again, doesn't seem like the most important or work. It's not the stuff that nonprofit leaders tend to be passionate about. But if we can help them be better at that, we make it more likely that they can do the needed work that they're doing, rather than all of a sudden spending all of their staff time and efforts not on accomplishing their mission, but on responding to a government investigation or defending a lawsuit or trying to get their corporate existence back because they were accidentally taken out of existence by noncompliance. So again, it might not be obvious that corporate governance and compliance are like big deals for mission work, but they are. So that's why we do what we do in the nonprofit world. And I think around this time now, as we head into the Christmas season, we're recording 3 days before Christmas here, but we figured as we, as Catholics especially, finish the last days of Advent and head into the Christmas season where we celebrate the coming of the Savior, this amazing act of love of God becoming a baby, right? Becoming a human person, God made flesh. Um, it's amazing to stop and reflect on how much God loves this world, the humanity that he created, that he would come and be one of us. And so in this time of joy and gratitude and wonder at what our faith means and what it's given to us, we just thought it would be a nice time to spend a few minutes here off of our regular programming and just talk about what we do and why we're grateful for all the nonprofits that we serve, all the people in the religious liberty space, all our friends who are in this movement together with us, and just kind of highlight at a high level the work we're doing and all of our allies and friends are doing and why we think it's so important. So, Joseph, any closing words here?
Yeah, just like you said, faith-based nonprofits, both from a natural law and just a practical perspective, get this important work done better. And that's why we're so grateful to get to, like you said, serve these groups on the boring stuff, but the boring stuff matters. Every week we talk about a different boring thing that turns into sometimes a really big issue. Like you said, even just failing to be compliant can end up losing your C3 status, and then you don't have the money you need to go help the people that you're trying to serve. So we're very grateful, like you said, to get to do this work, and very grateful for the people that do it with us. We're excited for the next year of keeping the uphold civil society through the boring stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll just end with that. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be excited about the work that we get to do, and I think it works on different levels, right? For those who really care about limited government, what we do is important because it's keeping a lot of these social welfare and other endeavors that belong in the private nonprofit space where they belong. Because the more you keep faith-based nonprofits and other kinds of private associations from doing this work, the more you'll have government grow and fill the vacuum with more and more government programs. So if you're on board with limited government, you should be on board with what we're doing. And then on the civilizational level, like you said, to keep a healthy society, we need nonprofits that are doing all of this important work and connecting people through private associations. But then on the most fundamental level, I mean, we're here because we believe that the faith is the highest good and that people should be religious, right? That people are saved through Jesus Christ and the Catholic faith, and the organizations that we support are largely doing the good work of helping bring Christianity to the people, and that is something worth supporting. So it's always good to highlight that. We believe in limited government, we believe in civil society, but ultimately we're doing this because we're Catholic, and we think that it's good for religion to flourish in the most ultimate sense. Like, this is the good. So being able to do legal and policy work that supports this ultimate good of the work of the church is a real blessing. And so with that, I think we will forego our normal conclusion. If you want to like and subscribe to our podcast, you know where to do that. If you want to support our work, you can go to napalegalinstitute.org. But above all, we just thank you for joining us. We wish you a Merry Christmas, and we will talk to you all in the new year. Thanks for joining us. God bless you.